So today's lesson is our third installment of our Prosperity series for this year. It's a series that we titled Being Prosperous No Matter What, which aligns with our overall theme for the entire year of how to stay centered no matter what. We offered our first two installments back in January and in May, and we leave some space in between our prosperity lessons each year so that we can use that time to learn more about what's been offered, to start practicing the tools in our own lives, and to make note of the ways in which our experiences of prosperity and abundance in our lives are changing. So if you missed the first two lessons and you want to go back and check those out, you can go directly to our YouTube channel or get to YouTube through our website. And the dates you want to look for are January 23rd and May 14th. Today's lesson is about grace, the prosperity of grace. And just the other night, on Thursday evening, I was with some members of our prayer chaplain team. Each year at this time, we come together, we break bread, we share a meal, and then we move into share what we call the ceremony of dedication. And it is a part of our annual training program. And that night, that experience is always such a rich, sacred experience. It's a time of sacred connection. It's a time of deepening the bonds that are shared between each other. There is either a rededication or for some a new dedication of service to the prayer chaplain team. And during our time of ritual on Thursday, the topic of grace came up as the result of a scripture verse that had been shared. And the verse is from 2 Corinthians, it's chapter 12, verse 9. And it reads, "My grace is sufficient for you." My grace is sufficient for you. As I thought of those words in relation to today's lesson, I was taken back to 2018 and our fall series for that year when we used the book, The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. And she presented that word sufficient to us as one to start shifting to our using when we think about prosperity and abundance in our lives. That when we are in a consciousness of sufficiency, the flow of whatever form of prosperity is coming into our lives, it feels natural, it feels positive, it feels good. It's that same consciousness of sufficiency that can help us to then release any thoughts or beliefs that would try to tell us that there is not enough, beliefs that would tell us that, no, we have to keep on trying to accumulate and amass as much as we possibly can for ourselves because it's going to run out. Right? So it is this consciousness of sufficiency that I'd like us to enter into as we start exploring the prosperity that is grace. One that Scripture tells us is already ours, that there is more than enough for everybody, and sometimes it is the only thing we need in order to navigate experiences in life. So we're going to approach grace today by putting it between two bookends. And those bookends are grit and gratitude. My friend and colleague, Reverend Kelly Isola, she presented this trinity of terms in an article she wrote for one of Unity's booklets that was put out a couple of years ago that was titled Grace and Gratitude. And she shared that when she gets a theme in order to write an article about, she will sometimes begin to wonder what our co-founder, Myrtle Fillmore, would have thought about it. And see, Myrtle was not one to do a whole lot of public speaking. And she left that up to her husband and our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, but she did write a lot. Not much of it is published officially, but it still exists, and it's always accessible through the archives out at Unity Village. And Kelly said that anytime she does what she calls a deep dive into Myrtle's writings, she inevitably finds a treasure trove of unexpected gems and surprises. And the gem she found this time was in many of the letters that Myrtle had written in response to prayer requests that had been sent to her. Kelly called it a rhythm. There was a rhythm in every single reply that Myrtle had written, and it was a rhythm made up of those three elements: grit, grace, and gratitude. And so we're going to step into this rhythm of prayer to move us deeper into our understanding and embrace of grace. So let's look at how grace can manifest from grit. Up until now, my experiences with the word grit were often those that were used, there were other words used in conjunction with it, like dirt and grease and grime, things that we want to pretty much get rid of in some way, right? And yet considering it through this perspective of prayer, another view became apparent to me. I mean, yes, we could view the grit of prayer as Kelly wrote about it being all those things we want to remove from our lives, the challenges, the hurts, the hard times, the disappointments, the failures, and so on and so forth. But on another hand, grit can also be seen as a wonderful quality within us, one that we would want to take into our times of prayer. See, it's a quality that's made up of characteristics such as determination and perseverance, bravery and courage, tenacity and passion. And we can also apply this twofold perspective to grace. I mean, yes, we can see it as something that is typically showing up only during the hard times, something that makes them more bearable, less tragic than they might otherwise have been. It's something that we look for evidence of when we're moving through times of grief and sorrow. And we have access to another perspective of grace that rests in the origin of the word itself, which just means to rejoice. To rejoice. So how can we accelerate and increase the opportunity to rejoice, to experience the presence and the activity of grace as a result of our prayers? Well, in our article, Kelly writes about practice and release. Practice and release. And in the context of what I'm outlining today, which is a different one than Kelly presented, we practice our prayer practice. And instead of demanding relief from life's difficulties and circumstances or immediate answers to every question that we pose, we move into our prayer affirming courage. We move into our prayer calling forth a willingness to stay the course, to persevere in our prayer practice for as long as it takes, knowing that God's grace is sufficient. And it will show itself to us when we are ready to see it, when we are ready to feel it, when we are ready to hear it, when we are ready to accept it. And then, as we do with just about every prayer offered during our services, we release that prayer. And in that space, we step into that wonderfully open space and we fill it with expectation and anticipation of the time when we will rejoice. Kelly offered a beautiful visual of this. She had a visual of a ballet dancer. And she said, we watched the dance movements, which she described as being so graceful, so supple. And they are so because of all of the practice and release that ballet dancer has experienced prior to sharing their gifts for us to see. And what we are witness to when we do is that dancer rejoicing in their body, or as Sir Kelly's words were, they rejoice in the sweetness of life energy. But the same experience of sweetness, the same grace, can also be had through our words and our actions, and notably in our words and actions associated with our prayers. There are many, but I think one of the greatest gifts that we can offer to another in a time of prayer is that of acceptance. And that also came up during our prayer chaplain gathering the other night. It was noted by one of the chaplains how important it is for her to meet you, to meet those who ask her for prayer right where you are, and to do so without even an ounce of judgment in her mind, in her heart, in her own emotions, in her words of prayer to you. You see, prayer chaplains come to learn, they come to understand that many times it has taken you every ounce of courage you could muster in order to get up, walk to them, and ask for prayer. Each of us has likely had at least one life experience that has brought us to our knees while at the same time, there's still something inviting us to keep on going, to not quit, to hold true to our desires, to listen and tend to our passions. And I know that one thing that can help us to do that on even our darkest of days is to have someone accept us in the darkness. Someone who wants so badly to just start turning on all kinds of spiritual lights and yet knows it would be the worst thing that they could do for you in that moment. And so our chaplains, the myrtles of unity of Traverse City, they consistently practice and release together as a team and in their individual lives so that they are grounded in a space of pure, unadulterated acceptance to you and to your request for prayer. Acceptance of who you are, where you are, that is grace in action. And so many times it is more than sufficient to give you a very safe and soft space to land, even if just for a few moments. Remember that, not only as you practice your acceptance of others, but maybe more importantly, when you practice acceptance of yourselves. Either way, this grace that comes forth in the presence of our words and our actions of prayer, it can continue to grow and multiply beyond only those few moments. See, the more grit you show, in terms of those characteristics noted earlier, the longer and more lasting those moments will become. And the longer and more lasting they become, the stronger they get. And the stronger they get, they begin to take on such an energy that it starts to fill your entire being and start to impact every aspect of your life. Reverend Kelly wrote it this way. She said, grace appears as vitality bursting forth into being, so that we might be brought further into the mystery of living. Being brought further into the mystery of living. Kelly believes that Myrtle Fillmore demonstrated that principle in every prayer request reply she authored. See, when grace becomes so strong, and our awareness of it just as strong, the mystery of living, it doesn't look as unknown or scary as it can sometimes be. Because what grace does is support us in trusting life, trusting the spiritual principles that we practice and whose roots in us we deepen, trusting how we're living our lives, trusting the decisions that we make and the actions that we take in life. And when we get to that point, then with each new sunrise and sunset, we begin and end each day with so much more gratitude for life. More gratitude for the wholeness present in the many interrelated facets of our lives and our overall well-being. More gratitude for the presence of Spirit and its grace in our lives. My grace is sufficient for you. Spirit really said a mouthful when it placed those words on the heart for the Apostle Paul to write in his authorship of 2 Corinthians. I say that because I have come to see and understand more clearly how much grace I have experienced in my life, especially just over the last 19 months. The grace, going back to the beginning of 2020. The grace that kept showing up in ways that helped me to stay focused, helped me to not give up, helped me to find the courage to step into so many unknowns, to discover new levels of resiliency and vitality in order to do what was mine to do, to lead us through the pandemic and all that came our way because of it. The same grace that at the end of each day helped me to sit down and be okay with whatever had occurred and accept that on any given day I had given it my best. And then there was grace that showed up when I found myself in the hospital for a couple of days at the beginning of this year. Grace that brought me peace, carried me through so many significant and unexpected fears and emotions that I experienced in just that 36-hour window of time. Grace that brought me so many wonderful medical professionals, both in and outside of the hospital, who sat with me, who listened to me, cared for me, and always accepted me exactly how I was when I was in their presence. And then there's grace. It enfolded me once again as I leaned into some of the more poignant questions of life, including that of my passion, my call, the work that I do. And in this grace, it showed up in a way that I had not expected about a month ago. And it showed up as a knowing. See, it's one of those experiences that you know that you know that you know. You know, like Paul knew that it was Spirit putting those words of grace on his heart to write for us to be able to read centuries later. And what I have come to know, and know that I know, is that it is time. The time has come for my time of service to you as your senior minister to come to a close. I want you to know that I am so very aware that likely none of you, except the board, showed up today expecting to hear that. And my heart is open to you. My heart is open to whatever you may be feeling, whatever you may be thinking. And I also want you to know that since early this morning and continuing throughout this afternoon, there are some very special people in my life who are surrounding all of us in prayer right now. Something else that's very important that you hear is that this knowing, it went a bit further. See, it's not just ending my time as your senior minister. It's ending my time in senior ministry. See, I'm not leaving to go be a senior minister somewhere else. In fact, when I first accepted this grace, this knowing that it was time for me to step down, I had no place to go. There was not another job that I was going to. All I knew in my heart was that I would return back to my former home state of Kansas and do it in a complete state of surrender as much as I possibly could, trusting that I would be provided for and that I would be guided to the next aspect of my call. The Spirit doesn't always like when I plan, and it decided it wasn't going to wait for me to get back to Kansas before it stepped into action on my behalf. It went right to work in ways that I'm still trying to grasp. Because within just a couple of weeks of taking those steps of inner spiritual surrender, a position was created and approved at my former church at Unity of Alhambra Park, Kansas, as the Associate Minister of Operations. And they reached out and offered me the job, and I accepted it just a couple of weeks ago. So again, I know that this is a lot to take in. And I imagine that there are a whole lot of questions, wonderings going on in your minds. But today, it's not a time for planning and processes. It's not a time for details and timelines. In fact, with only a few minutes having passed since hearing the news, there's going to be so many more questions than there are answers for right now, and there would be in any community. But if you can hear me, hear my assurances that our friends, our colleagues at Unity Worldwide Ministries and the Great Lakes Unity Region have the processes. They have the resources to assist us going forward. There is an answer that will be found for every question that comes up. But not today. Not today. Today, I know that my heart is feeling very fragile. Maybe some of yours are as well. And I know that mine is because any goodbye brings with it an almost automatic reflexive action of looking back to where a particular journey began. And for me, whether I look back or I look straight ahead, I see the same thing. See, I see a group of people who back there had for 3 decades built a spiritual community that you love, that you are so very proud of, that you protect in the same way a parent protects a child. A group of people who took a chance and invited a novice senior minister to join them. And from the day I arrived, you have accepted me, you have stretched me and grown me, you have called me higher, and you have been a catalyst for me to go deeper within myself. And it's there that one of the strongest roots of my calling exists. And it's one that I believe to be so crucial in order to be an authentic minister, and that is that I must practice what I preach. And to resist, even for a moment, this knowing in my soul, it would be the greatest disservice that I could ever do to you and to this beloved community. And so in these coming weeks, I will do all that I can to assist the Board of Trustees and you as we move into this time of transition. And the board will speak to that briefly a little bit later. I will be here through August. My last official day will be the last Sunday in August 29th. Now I've had the luxury to be with all of this for a while. And what I can share with you from that time is that I am absolutely certain there is no doubt anywhere in my mind, my heart, my spirit, that God has been preparing me. It has been preparing you and this church for this time of change. Because you see, the true strength of the ministry isn't me. It's never been any of the wonderful ministers that you have called to be with you. The truth of its strength is in the hearts of all of you. It's in the people who watch or listen to us online. It's in the love that you have and the service that you give. And it's also somewhere else. It's in the grace of God, which is always sufficient for all of us. I love you all so very much. God bless you. And of course, I'll be available to you after the service.